Hello everyone, I'm back today with a video I was supposed to film last week, but didn't, because I'm organized like that. So today is gonna be one of those more unorganized, unscripted videos, because we all know how good I am at those. I thought that I'd make another academic video because I haven't done one in a while. I think I haven't been keeping track with my recording content for a while, so I'm guessing it's been a while since I filmed an academic-y video. So today I thought I'd talk about my extended essay because why not? So I have with me my extended essay and I'm going to be talking through it. So I'm just gonna be like literally like flipping through my extended essay and talking about it, and hopefully it'll be useful to you guys because I got an A on my EE. I did it in English Lit, so if you're doing an English Lit EE, hopefully this will be useful. I'm hoping it'll be useful, because honestly this is not going to be a very organized video. It's literally just gonna be me talking, like flipping through my extended essay, picking out the good things and bad things about it. So maybe you'll find something useful, maybe you won't, but hopefully I'm not doing this for nothing. So let's get started. First off, let's just talk about the cover page. Okay, so because of like the new format, we're not allowed to put our names on it, nor are we supposed to like put our candidate number and stuff like that. We only allowed our personal code. This extended essay was written by, actually I don't know if I'm supposed to give you my personal code, but yeah, it's written by these 6 figures. So that's my name according to the IBO. So my title is, you're gonna love this. Painting the Black Woman's Image. How does Audrey Lorde use imagery to portray the Black woman's experience in her poetry? And if that doesn't sound pretentious enough for you, then I don't know what does. So every time someone asks me, what did you do your extended essay on? I always tell them I did it on late 20th century African American feminist poetry, because it sounds cool, when really all I did was read through like 5 poems and wrote essays for each of them, because I like sounding self-important. Actually, you know what? People like to throw the word pretentious around every time someone gets passionate about a subject they really like. So if you think me talking about something I really like in an articulate manner is pretentious, then that's not my problem. It's yours. Deal with it. Anyways, actually it's not a bad thing to sound pretentious when you're writing an extended essay, because you need to be really confident with your argument, and you need to be really confident with your research, because if you don't, it's gonna be really blatantly obvious to the examiner, and like your essay is just not gonna be good if you don't like it. Bottom line is, if you don't enjoy your topic, if you're not passionate enough or interested enough in your topic, you're not going to be able to write it well enough to really hit those high criteria. So if you're thinking about picking an extended essay topic, pick a topic that you like, that you're actually interested in. For me, I'm really interested in race relations and gender relations, and the politics of race and gender. And out of all the subjects I've studied, English Lit really gave me like a large scope to work with when it comes to the analysis of race and gender in society through the lens of an author, or in this case a poet. The poet being Audrey Lorde. If you are if you're fairly well versed in like feminist academia and sociology and critical race theory, then Audrey Lorde is like a pretty big name in that. She's almost kind of like bell hooks, kind of like Maya Angelou, kind of like one of those people. She's really like one of those big like names in the history of like black feminism and womanism and stuff like that. And so yeah, and since she was a poet, I was like, yeah, why not? Why not go for it? And Audrey Lorde's poetry is typically not taught in high school. It's something you typically do in university, or if you're in America, it's something you typically tackle in college in like in either English Lit or Women's Studies and Gender Studies courses. And so because it's not, and because she's not a very well-known poet, and because her poetry seems to be like really up there, I was like, I thought it'd probably give me an edge, because there's a criteria in your extended essay that like marks originality. It's not a big criteria, but I thought that I could be if I were able to like tackle a really obscure poet in terms of like high school level, then maybe I could score as much in that criteria, and that's gonna help me overall. So pick a topic. Don't only pick a topic that you're interested in, pick a topic that's not overdone, because that's gonna help you a lot. It won't help you as much as like other things in the extended essay, because if everyone's trying to be original, nothing's original. It will just give you that extra boost if you can pick a topic that's just not typically done in high school. So let's start. So before everything else, we have an abstract, and it's real difficult to write an abstract for a humanities extended essay, because there's no clear-cut methodology. So basically what I did was that I have a summary of my introduction on top, a summary of what I actually did, so like what poems I used and like how I used them in the essay and stuff like that. And then in the last part of the abstract, it was like a summary of my conclusion. So your abstract is the last thing you write. It has to be less than 300 words, and basically it's a summary of your introduction, a summary of your methodology, or in the case of like humanities, a summary of what you actually did to write, or like what you actually did during a research process, and then a summary of your conclusion. So for example, my conclusion was, it is concluded that Lorde's use of distinctive symbolic and metaphorical imagery in each poem ultimately works to provide the reader with vivid insight into the convoluted themes of Black female oppression. So that was my conclusion. So it's of all the things you're summarizing, the summary of your conclusion should be like the smallest. I don't have the criteria with me right now, and I don't know it by heart, but yeah, typically you want to spend more time summarizing your intro and your methodology than you want to do your conclusion. Okay, then we have our contents. So you have your introduction, body, conclusion, bibliography, appendices, and my appendices are the poems that I used. Typically if you have like, yeah, typically if you're doing poetry, then you want to like put your poems in your appendices and reference them throughout the essay. Just cause if you're doing a novel, you really don't want to put that in your appendices, I'm telling you right now, because that just wouldn't make sense. Yeah, but for poetry, it's advised that you do. For your body, my teacher told me that the IBO doesn't really like it if you have just body and nothing else. So you want to like split your essay into like a bunch of different subsections in your body, or like mini chapters, because like when you're writing a dissertation in university, you're gonna have chapters throughout your dissertation. So for example, mine's like, my first chapter is like the intersection, then the struggle and the perception, the formation of speech and identity, the woman's place. I've got 4 chapters in total. Each of them is about, let's see, it's about like 2 to 4 pages each. Like depends on the length of my poem. So my first one was like two pages and a bit. My second one was about like, yeah, about 2 pages as well. And like, yeah, so each section or each mini chapter should be about 2 to 4 pages long. Like, just like guide yourself for that. Yeah, but like the IBO likes it if you split your body into like different areas that you're gonna tackle. So for me, it was a different sort of themes that came out in each of like Lorde's poetry. So I have like the theme of intersectionality, and then the theme of like the perception of blackness, and so on. So that's sort of how I went through it. You can also do it you can also, depending on your like whatever topic you're doing, you can split it into like author's choice, or like audience impact, or like diction, and then imagery, and you know, whatever. But yeah, just split your body into different sort of subtopics so that you can like, it's easier to focus in smaller chunks than it is to have just like one huge body. And it also shows the examiner that you actually care about your topic enough to split it into different sections to tackle, if that makes any sense. You know, like, yeah, you're actually putting effort into this. Right, so for my introduction, basically for my introduction, it's 1.5 pages long, but typically most introductions are like 1 page. Mainly because for your introduction, that's where you have to have a lot of context. So I put a lot of context about Audrey Lorde and her work, and I included a lot of like referencing like people discussing her work, and like I referenced essays about Audrey Lorde and dissertations about Audrey Lorde. And literally when I say that, what I really mean was that I went on Google Scholar, took a sentence out of like an introduction about an essay on Audrey Lorde, and just like stuck it in the introduction because I really needed like secondary sources. So that's basically what I did, and it works. So if you're looking for secondary sources, literally go on Google Scholar, type in like the name of your author, poet, or writer, and a bunch of essays about them are probably gonna appear. Go through their abstracts or introductions of these essays and like pick out a quote that's like relevant to what you're doing and reference it. And be consistent with your referencing, because that's part of the criteria. If you're gonna use MLA, stick with MLA. I used APA, so I had to stick with APA all throughout. Meaning no footnotes. APA doesn't use footnotes, but MLA does, I think. But yeah. I also used quotes from some of Lorde's own personal essays. I think like my favorite quote is tools of a racist patriarchy are used to examine the fruits of that same patriarchy. Lorde, the martyr's tools will never dismantle the martyr's house. 1984. I like that quote a lot. Yeah. So anyways, that's sort of like how you structure your introduction, and your last sort of paragraph of your introduction should be focused on like, well, what are you actually going to do with this essay? So I talked about okay, so for example, you need to have 1 or 2 sentences in there telling the examiner what you're actually going to do with this essay, what you're actually, the direction you're going to take with your research. So for example, mine was my signposting thesis statement was this essay is an analysis of Lorde's utilization of imagery in her portrayal of black women and their specific experiences. So like, yeah, and you need to include your research question in your introduction as well. So my research question was, how does Audrey Lorde use imagery to portray the black woman's experience in her poetry? So that, followed by your thesis statement, should be signposting pretty much what you're going to do with your essay. That should be sufficient, but you know, you can add in a little bit of like food for thought here and there. Like, why is it so important? Why is it important? Why is this research important? I talked about how it's all about like getting modern culture to recognize instances of prejudice and how they sort of manifest, specifically manifest through the intersection of sexism and racism, and how it's like still like relevant today. So you need to not only do you have to signpost what you're gonna do with your essay, you need to like somehow prove that the research is significant, you know what I mean? To really boost you up to those higher criteria. Wow, I cannot English. I've been coughing so much. My throat is just dying. Okay, next we're gonna talk about the body. So I don't want to focus too much on what I did on the body, because I already went through it. I talked about how I separated it according to like what I'm dealing with and stuff like that. It's also important to note it's important to note that for a literature extended essay, the IBO really likes it if you use like perspectives of different critics of the work you're dealing with. For me, I didn't really use literary critics. I used more political writers in my body. So I used writers and like yeah, writers who talk about Audrey Lorde and Audrey Lorde's work in politics and stuff like that, to sort of support like what I'm trying to say, my argument about what her poetry is trying to say. So for example, I have a good example here for coal, right? Oh, sorry, my battery died. Okay, where did I stop? Yes, so for example, on my section on the poem Coal, which is titled The Formation of Speech and Identity, I used a really good quote. Okay, so for this particular section, it was dealing with the idea that where is it? Yeah, about Lorde being different, and that she's like coming from the earth's inside rather than walking on the surface like everyone else. So this poem has a lot to do with the idea of difference and being different, and difference in the feminist movement that Lorde was sort of championing. And so I brought in this quote from Dudley 2006. She wrote an essay on how Audrey Lorde's work affected like modern feminist activism online, or something like that, around that. So the quote was, "Difference, diversity and inclusion should be the lifeblood of the feminist movement." So that was sort of like the quote I used to support my analysis of like Lorde's ideas. So like, I'm not just making, you know, this shit up. there are people out there who've done research on Audrey Lorde's politics and her work, and I've got proof right here. So my argument is pretty solid, you know what I mean? So like I wouldn't say use a literary critic to sort of support your own argument and your own analysis and your own criticism, but rather like use any sort of secondary source to sort of ground your argument in some sort of in reality, so to speak. I think that's another example, really good example, I think. No, I have a really good example in my essay on the black unicorn. Just to illustrate my point again. Right, so for the black unicorn, I was talking about how here, where like the idea of the unicorn's horn being a phallus, and like it being found in the moon pit of a woman rather than between her legs. So it's sort of like a reference to reproduction, and how basically when Audrey Lorde uses that analogy, she's talking about the power that comes with reproduction and femininity and stuff like that. And so I have a quote here to support that argument. And this quote is from an essay Lorde wrote herself. The master's tool will never dismantle the master's house. I talked about it earlier on, I think. So, only within a patriarchal structure is maternity the only social power open to women. So again, using quotes to ground your argument and your analyses in some sort of reality, so that it's stronger and it makes you sound as though you know what you're talking about. Rather than just having, here's what I think this is, and I want you to believe me. Okay, like, I think it's more than that. Like, part of the criteria for the extended essay is having enough data to back up your research. And so for English Lit, the data would be examples from the text and your secondary sources. Secondary sources being quotes and essays written by other people, either about the author's life, the author's work, or the author's like literature, stuff like that. So try and incorporate that, but don't use their analyses to substitute your own. So don't use their analyses to substitute your own. Use it to like support your own argument. You still need to come up with your own analysis, because that's what the extended essay is about. It's about your own engagement with the subject and the topic at hand. I think that's all I want to talk about for body. Oh, here's another good quote. I just want to like bring it up because like, okay, so this is what I was looking for. Again, Cole. I talked about how like the last few lines of the poem Cole has this idea of like, evokes this idea of like the image of light and enlightenment and jewels, and like how coal turns into jewel. And I talked about how it's sort of like related to, or how it's sort of like connected to Audrey Lorde's contribution to feminism and the third wave movement, the third wave of the movement. And I have a quote here to support that, again from Dudley, 2006. Her full name's Rachel Dudley. She wrote, she turned the silence surrounding intersectionality into language and action and left a rubric of articulate thought for future generations to follow. Now, if that quote isn't going to impress the examiners, I don't know what will. and they gave me an A, so I guess it did. So yeah, secondary and primary sources, use both. Primary sources, like what I said before, the examples from the text, and your secondary sources, things people have written about either the author or the text itself. Okay, let's just, before I get carried away from like some of the things I've written, because some of it's pretty good, some of it's pretty cringy. I'm not gonna lie, I have spotted a few grammatical errors here and there, like missing commas and stuff like that, but they didn't impact my grade too much. I did, you know, just get an A. Like, I think I just surpassed the borderline for an A, which I think is pretty amazing, because it's pretty difficult to get an A for an English extended essay. In my entire year, I was the only English extended essay writer. I was the only student writing an English extended essay that got an A. There are two students in my year who got an A for the extended essays. Me and this other guy who did it on his biology EE. So again, science extended essays, I have no background in, so I'm not gonna give any advice on that. Anyways, so for my conclusion, oh, actually, I just want to talk about another thing. Throughout your body, it's important that, yeah, you maintain, again, I think what I said this before, make sure your referencing is consistent throughout. So if you're going to use MLA, use MLA. If you're going to use APA, use APA. APA doesn't use footnotes, MLA does. It all depends on what referencing your school uses. My school uses APA, so I use APA. And for extended essay, it's really good to reference appendices. So like what I mentioned before, for poetry, it's advised that you have an appendix at the end of all your poems. If I can just show you. So it's after your bibliography. Here, for example, like appendices and stuff like that. Like, you can just see, yeah, appendices and stuff. Yeah, and then just reference it by saying throughout your body, like if you have the title of the poem, say for example Coal, see appendix 3, or like the Black Unicorn, see appendix 2, like that. Just like in a bracket. Don't use footnotes again if you're using APA, but if you use MLA, I think you can use footnotes. I think you can use footnotes for APA so long as you're not referencing something, but then again, just do your research on like how to properly reference, because it's part of the criteria. So you really need to know how to reference correctly. Okay, so I just wanted to mention that. Reference your appendices, or else no one's gonna know where to look for them. For conclusions for your extended essay for English Lit, it's a little bit abstract. It's a little bit more vague compared to like if you're writing something for like science or social science, or like something where you're like dealing with going through actual like data and stuff like that. For your conclusion for your English Lit or like language or literature essays, a lot of it has to do with like, so what actually have you managed to prove through your analyses? So have you like answered your research question? So my research question was, how does Audrey Lorde use imagery to portray the Black woman's experience? So I talked about, okay, so what have I found now that I've analyzed like her poems, her poetry. So answering the research question, I answered, okay, Lorde conjures powerful images of black womanhood in her poetry. The vivid and confrontational depictions force one to critically analyze the intersecting issues of race and gender. It is through her metaphorical and symbolic imagery that readers garner a thorough understanding of the convoluted systems of oppression that inform the black woman's subjugation, a matter relevant to this very day. So I talked about the impact her imagery has on the reader and the audience. So a lot of like things in English lit for conclusions all about, usually it usually has to do with like the impact on the reader, the impact on the intended audience. What is she trying to prove? What is she trying to get? Like, what is your author trying to prove? What is your author trying to get the reader to see? What point are they trying to make? You know, it's all about repeating, like, just repeat the main points you've made throughout the extended essay. Another tip, I don't think I did this, but you know how I mentioned like we have all those subsections, and at the end of those subsections you're probably going to have some sort of mini conclusion. So another good way to sort of write your conclusion is to like summarize all those mini conclusions into one big conclusion. So yeah, it's all about just answering the research question. My research question was, how does Audrey Lorde use imagery to portray a black woman's experience? And the answer was, she uses like metaphors and symbolism, stuff like that, in order to like confront the reader and like force them to analyze society and ideas of race and gender and how they intersect. So that's basically what my conclusion was in the answer to my research question. And then always leave your end your conclusion with a little food for thought. Like, for example, Lorde's social criticism transcends social conditions. Her poetry still begs the question, do our adversities exist in isolation, or do we need to implore change for the disestablishment of all oppressions instead of focusing on just one? So yeah, just like once you've answered the research question, then go back on like what you did in your introduction. Like how in your introduction you talked about, why is my research, why is your extended essay significant? Why is it important that you do this research? Like, how's it going to contribute to society? You want to bring that up again in your conclusion. Like, it's important that we recognize this. It's like my research is important because it reveals this. Talk about the significance of your research. So to just make it that much more powerful, like a more powerful ending. Yeah, just that's pretty much my extended essay. Just a few side notes. Based on like what you've heard and stuff like that, I used quite a lot of like extensive vocabulary just to make my work sound extra pretentious. Yeah, for lack of a better adjective to describe it. And to be completely honest, my vocabulary is not that varied. I rely a lot on thesaurus. Use thesaurus and Microsoft. Use the thesaurus and Microsoft Word. Like, rely on it heavily to vary your vocabulary and make yourself seem more confident in your writing. But don't like use a word that's just so obscure and it's like just completely irrelevant to the context of the sentence. Like, pick your words properly. Yeah, so that's just another tip. If you want to sound more complex and more confident in your writing, use a varied range of vocabulary and rely heavily on the thesaurus. Like, that's what I did. That's what I always do with my writing. Anyways, that's it for my extended essay. I hope this video was helpful. I don't think it was. It's literally just me talking about what I did in my extended essay and what I thought I did pretty well. And maybe it's gonna help you. Probably not, but if it does, then I guess I did something good today. I guess I did something productive. So I guess I'll see you guys later, hopefully, but I wouldn't know why you want to stick around on my channel. I'm just really lonely.